Welcome to today's Substack Live with me and Julien Hoez from my side from Gulfstream Blues and Julien.
I'm not at the beach, but I'm in Brussels, so I've been following everything very closely.
Yeah, so I'm in Barcelona at the moment. Julien is in Brussels. So we're going to be talking about kind of the two perspectives on what has been happening with the Ceuta crisis. And I can tell you people here in Spain have a very particular perspective on this for obvious reasons. And there is real anger here about how the EU handled this and how other European countries handled this. And we'll get into that a bit. Maybe just in case anyone just got back from your summer holidays and you don't know what happened there, maybe Julien, do you want to give a quick summary of what happened since Thursday?
Yes, so you've only missed what is potentially the biggest betrayal of trust since I think the financial crisis, or even Mark Rutte during COVID. Basically, what happened is last week, out of nowhere, about 60,000, I guess we can call them migrants from Morocco.
Now the estimate's been revised up to 72,000, which is
Even
roughly the
worse.
same as the population of Ceuta.
Yes, so 72,000
Like,
people broke through the barriers of the Spanish-Morocco border, effectively, as many have put it, invaded Ceuta and ushered in 24 hours of relative chaos where the Spanish authorities scrambled to have a rapid response to this. The Moroccan authorities basically went completely missing, which we'll get onto later on. And most sadly, as many of you will have seen from mine or Dave's writings recently, 22 of the 27 European member states basically betrayed Spain, tried to shut it out of the Schengen area temporarily due to what is either sheer opportunism or a lack of geographic knowledge. And Spain was effectively left to deal with one of the worst migrant crises, we could say, entre guillemets, not the right label, but we'll go with that for now, that we've seen for maybe 10 years now.
yeah, and so a little bit of context about Ceuta and Melilla. So Spain has two exclaves on the continent of Africa, but just immediately across the Strait of Gibraltar, which is Ceuta and Melilla. Now, lots of people have different opinions about whether Spain should still have those exclaves, but they are Spanish territory. I think people have particular opinions about the hypocrisy of Spain demanding that the UK leave Gibraltar while also insisting on their right to hold on to Ceuta and Melilla. But aside from that, I think the important context here to know, because I see a lot of people saying, well, Spain shouldn't still have colonies in Africa anyway. These were not colonies. Did not come in the period of European imperialism like the rest of Africa, when the rest of Africa was taken by Europe. Ceuta has been part of Portugal and Spain since 1415. So since many years before Columbus even sailed to the ocean blue, many years before there were any people of European descent on the North American or South American continent. So these have been part of Portugal and Spain, first Portugal, then Spain, for hundreds and hundreds of years. So that was the reasoning why when Spain decolonialized from its African possessions, most specifically first Spanish Morocco, which was the small part of Morocco, including Tangier, that was not part of France, that was not a French colony, that was a Spanish colony, and then eventually also a Spanish Sahara, which became Western Sahara, which is connected to all of this now. Spain's reasoning at the time, and still is, that those were not colonies, that they were not the same as the European colonization thing, and they are basically contiguous with Spanish territory. It's not like they're far-flung colonies. They are right next to Spain. They are connected to Spanish waters, and therefore Spain sees them as different.
Except for the fact that they are not considered part of the Schengen area,
Exactly.
Which is something very important to this entire shit show that we need to really get into.
Yeah, so there's two interesting things that Ceuta and Melilla are excluded from. And that one is the Schengen area. So when Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni immediately had this response of blaming Spain for this invasion, basically blaming Spain for being invaded, saying that it was Spain's migration policy that had motivated this, specifically their amnesty to people who have been living and working illegally in Spain for many years. Just this year, the Spanish government said if you've been here for many years working illegally, you can get temporary residence. That has infuriated many European countries, even though those countries have had their own amnesty programs, including Italy and Germany. So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy going on here. But, Pedro Sanchez is enemy number one for many conservative European leaders. He is the last EU leader on the left, effectively, because we don't count Mette Frederiksen in Denmark. She also joined in the attacking of Spain. He is basically a pariah in the European Union right now. And he is hated by the United States government, which I think caused a lot of European governments to join the bandwagon in Spain bashing because they wanted to suck up to Donald Trump. And that was certainly the case, I think, for Giorgia Meloni coming out so quickly and blaming Spain. But also, first she said that she was calling for Spain to be suspended from the Schengen area. That's not a thing. You can't have one country suspended from the Schengen area. They later clarified that what she meant was that they would be closing the borders to Spain. That basically, if you were coming from Spain to Italy on a flight or a boat, you will have to go through passport control. They have not notified that. It is possible to have temporary exemptions to the Schengen passport-free area, but you have to notify it to the Commission. Italy has not done that. Moreover, you can't just exclude one specific country. So I've seen these photos that people have been taking from after arriving in Italy on a flight from Spain, pointing them in one direction if they're coming from Spain, that they're only conducting these checks on flights from Spain. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't think that's legal under the Schengen Code. I'll see. I'm flying from Spain to Italy on Friday, so we'll see what I encounter at the airport. By the way, speaking of putting things in the comments, if you guys have any questions for us about the situation, put them here. We'll do our best to answer them with the caveat that a lot is not known here. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of why this happened. But it also seems that our European leaders don't want to ask the question about why this happened. Anyway, going back to Italy, the reason that this was so absurd for Italy to suspend the Schengen free travel area from Spain specifically is because Ceuta and Melilla are effectively not part of Schengen. And that's what these migrants really realized once they crossed into that border. You cannot get across, you have to cross a sea to get from Ceuta to Spain or to anywhere else in the EU. And you need to show documentation to do that, to prove that you can be in the EU legally. And so that's why almost all of the migrants have now returned to Morocco. 96% of them had been returned, I think, within 16 hours, right? So we don't know the exact reasons for that, but it may have been that they got to Ceuta and realized that wasn't Schengen. They weren't in Schengen. They couldn't then travel on to wherever they wanted to go. And there's absolutely no reason, therefore, to shut the borders with Spain because none of those migrants could have gone from Ceuta to here in mainland Spain. It's not possible. And there's no documentation of that. And there are no flights from Ceuta to anywhere other than Spain. There aren't any flights at all. There's no airports in Ceuta. There's an airport in Melilla, the other exit, but not in Ceuta. Anyway, so that was the reaction from European leaders. They all joined in Meloni's Spain bashing. 22 out of the EU's 27 governments, so basically everyone except France, Portugal, and Luxembourg signed this letter. Ireland didn't sign it because the letter was to Ireland because they hold the presidency right now of the council and they have to be neutral. Effectively blaming Spain for being attacked. The Spanish government was very mad about this. They came out with statements saying that this was political, that this was the completely inappropriate response, a lack of solidarity. And Pedro Sanchez said that Spain had effectively been attacked. But the question is, by whom? By whom was Spain attacked? And what we saw in yesterday's meeting of Home Affairs ministers is that they don't want the answer to that question. Not the EU partners, not the EU itself, and not Spain. Was reporting from Euractiv today that the Spanish government actually asked the other EU governments not to bring this up at yesterday's meeting, not to mention Morocco at all. And they've asked President von der Leyen this apparently as well. Julien, what do you think could be the reasons why Spain does not want to dig into what exactly happened here and what Morocco's role was in allowing 72,000 people to stream across the border?
I mean, what we saw really is, I mean, already, I published a map of the actual breakdown of the council vote online. What we saw is that the majority of the member states are right wing or far right. So you've got 12 EPP countries, 3 ECR countries, and one Patriots for Europe country. So out of the 22, 16 were right leaning parties who actively want to attack the SND or who are trying to work with Henriksen, whatever her name is, in Denmark, who is very, very, very tough on immigration, and many consider her not to be an SND or a socialist actor in
Basically,
general.
center left in name only.
So, and so this led to a lot of pressure for von der Leyen, who is a part of a right-wing party as well, and is a right-wing commission president, which brings some perspective to what they're doing, and also makes the cowardice of all the members not continuing the criticism, but instead praising Spain for what they did right over this crisis, even more hypocritical. Now, regarding why everybody is avoiding the Moroccan situation, there are so many reasons. First of all, to be entirely honest, the EU is currently fairly dependent on Morocco as a frontline country when it comes to migrant inflows into Europe. We tend to try to ignore this fact a lot of the time when we speak about immigration at the European level, but we are dependent on countries such as Morocco, Tunisia, and Turkey in terms of handling migrant inflows to Spain, Greece, or the Balkans, Italy. And this leads to these countries being able to behave in a fairly poor manner in general and apply pressure to the EU when they want additional funds or whatever. There is a possibility that there is an aspect of blackmail in this situation because of a request for more finances, because they're trying to force Spain to acquiesce and give them more financial benefits from the World Cup or what have you. And also, sometimes the European neighborhood countries behave like this because they feel disrespected for whatever reason. One aspect that happened recently was that Pedro Sanchez went to Algeria to visit Algeria to engage in discussions on oil imports and this kind of thing. And Morocco and Algeria do not have the most fun, the most positive relationship in general.
To put it mildly, I mean they are basically in a Cold War. The border is completely shut.
Yeah,
They absolutely hate each other.
to put it this way,
And there's on this question of Western Sahara.
Yes, and the Algerian nationalists actually like France more than they like Morocco, which is saying quite a lot on this topic. And so all of this combines to the fact that Morocco very likely used this King's Day celebration where they shut everything down, ordered the government forces on the border to actually leave the border and let these people in. And if videos that we've seen are to be believed, the government was actually busing these people into Ceuta themselves, and border guards were pointing them in the direction of where to go to harass. Will Morocco get away with this? Probably, because von der Leyen is giving them money. And a part of this is to keep them quiet.
That's the incredible thing.
Yeah, 400 million, I think I saw in the reports from yesterday. And on top of that, the reason why is because one, the dependency when it comes to migration. Two, they're trying to keep them close because Morocco has some slightly concerning ties to China and Russia. So Russia from a geopolitical / military point of view. China, who are planning to open up factories in Morocco to actually bust them into Europe and further damage the automotive industry, which is doing terribly. And on top of this, because we are dependent on certain chemical compounds and chemical products that we actually need for our agriculture right now. But I mean, the question that we should be asking ourselves, which I don't know why we're not asking ourselves more right now, is why have we not, seeing how Morocco has done this 4, 5, 6 times in the last decade and a half, why have we not reinforced or tasked Frontex to create another division specifically for the Spanish frontiers to prevent this from happening? Because the reason why this keeps happening is they keep pressuring and they get stuff out of it. They blackmail Spain into giving them things. They blackmail Europe to actually give them more funding. We're not doing enough to actually dissuade anybody from doing this. And one thing that we've mentioned a couple of times, and I mentioned in my article this morning, despite the fact that we created the crisis and force majeure regulation to deal with these situations and deal with, for example, the Belarusian frontier being swamped by migrants being redirected by Russia, why did we not do what we needed to do and actually trigger these mechanisms that we have to deal with it? And why did the far right and the right not do more to actually try to deal with this thing, considering the fact that, let's face it, the socialist Pedro Sanchez has done the most out of the entire European continent and the European Union in dealing with reducing irregular flows of migration into the European continent. Because one fun fact, Spain, I think, is somewhere in the 140 to 170,000 per year figure, which is after a reduction of 32%. I think Italy is somewhere in the realm of 240,000 migrants coming yearly into Italy, into Europe through the Italian routes. And yet all of these actors are attacking Spain as if Spain is the vortex
So
absorbing
Spain is
all
the
of these
villain.
people. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I mean, we should say that, we don't know for sure that Morocco was behind this, right? But there is a lot of reason to think that. One is that Morocco openly did this very recently, just back in 2021, and it was again in a dispute involving Western Sahara. So Western Sahara was this former Spanish colony that Morocco took back from Spain with this Green March invasion at the the dictator Francisco Franco was dying. They sent civilians into Western Sahara and were able to take it that way. But that has never been recognized by international law, by the UN. It's considered an illegal occupation. And there's a part of Western Sahara where they're fighting to be an independent state. They are supported by Algeria. Morocco is supported now by the United States, which just Donald Trump recognized Morocco's claim to Western Sahara in exchange for Morocco recognizing Israel for establishing diplomatic relations with Israel. And the reason they did this back in 2021, when they took the border force off of the border with Ceuta and Melilla, was because Spain had admitted one of the independence leaders in Western Sahara to a hospital in Spain. Now, there's no dispute that this happened. That is not a question. We know that Morocco did that. But back then, only a couple thousand people crossed the border, right? So it didn't become
like
this huge
10,000.
major thing. I think even less, I think like 7,000.
Yeah.
So, which is a significant number, but it didn't escalate into this major international thing. I suspect what may have happened here is that they were trying the same formula here and it got out of their control. I suspect, again, I have no way of knowing this, but I suspect that Morocco may not have intended for 72,000 people to scream across the border, but who knows? Maybe they did. We'd have reporting from the New York Times where they interviewed people there saying that they had been ushered across the border, ushered into the sea, basically to swim around the border that goes into the sea by Moroccan authorities.
Yeah.
And there's other people saying that Moroccan authorities were blocking black sub-Saharan Africans from going in. They were only trying to let Moroccan people in.
Yeah.
Presumably because they could be more easily returned. That the quick return was always the intention here. The intention here was always to send a message. The reasoning for that, we don't know. It could be about Pedro Sanchez's recent visit to Algeria. It could be a way for Morocco to send a message, hey, we can militarily take the Spanish territory at any point that we want. So keep that in mind. Or it may have been the same formula as the past, trying to get more funding. This type of thing. But another important piece of context here is that Morocco has been being encouraged by conservatives in the United States and in Israel to attack and invade these Spanish territories. This has been in Israeli newspapers. This has been floated on American right-wing news. And the Republicans in the U.S. Congress just passed a resolution not that long ago specifically saying that the unsettled issue of the Spanish territories bordering Morocco needs to be revisited, basically saying that a diplomatic solution needs to be found. What diplomatic solution? This is Spain does not. There's no disputes over. I mean, Google does not even dot these lines. It's not an unresolved issue. This is Spanish territory. And basically, the Republican Congress just passed a resolution saying, "Oh no, this is under dispute." Without specifically saying it, basically saying the United States no longer recognizes Spain's hold over these territories. And this is exactly what was previewed in that leaked State Department memo several months ago, where they said that they were going to work with countries to take away European overseas territories. When they specifically mentioned the Falkland Islands. Remember, this became very controversial in the UK when the British media found out that this internal State Department memo was saying the US government should help Argentina take the Falklands from the UK. Ceuta and Melilla were also envisioned here. So this was all spelled out. This was all planned. Is it that the Moroccan government felt that they have the tacit approval, the tacit green light from the US government to do this as a precursor to a full invasion? And was it meant to demonstrate to the world that Spain would not have Europe's support if they invaded and took these territories by force? And that's where the other difference that I was referring to before for these territories comes into play, because it's not just that they're not in Schengen, they're also not a part of NATO's Article 5 guarantee. In NATO's Article 5, it specifically says that this Article 5 guarantee only applies to territories in Europe and North America, with the exception of French Algeria. France made them include that, and with the exception of Turkey. But everything else, basically, this was the insistence of the Americans, because obviously the United States was encouraging decolonization, and they didn't want to get into a situation where Article 5 was being triggered to get NATO involved in a decolonializing war. That, NATO would go to Vietnam. I mean, the US went to Vietnam anyway. But, or any of these African territories that Europeans were refusing to leave. That's the reason that was in there. And actually, at the Madrid summit, when NATO had its annual summit in Madrid a couple of years ago, the Spanish government wanted to change this. They wanted to have a specific provision added to the Article 5 guarantee to say that, no, this does include Ceuta and Melilla. The rest of the NATO allies said, no, it's not necessary. It's understood. It's understood that they're included. Well, it's not understood that they're included. The text of the paper says that if Morocco invades Ceuta and Spain triggers Article 5, that's not actually grounds for the rest of the alliance to come to Spain's defense. It would be if Morocco attacked the Spanish mainland, or, as I read it, if they attacked ships in Spanish waters or even international waters in the Mediterranean, but not just a land invasion in Ceuta. So the big question is Morocco preparing for a larger invasion? Do they have a U.S. green light for that? Do they think they have a U.S. green light for that? All very concerning things, and yet this was not brought up at all at that meeting yesterday. And you can see why, because it's a very, very thorny issue. It's not just a thorny issue. I mean, it is a thorny issue because they're relying on Morocco to police these borders now. And Morocco clearly has Spain and Europe at large by the balls here in terms of migration. But also, they could stir up this hornet's nest of antagonizing Morocco so much that they did invade Ceuta or Melilla. And the third factor here is, given that the U.S. government and the Republican Congress is now encouraging Morocco to invade the territory of an EU member state, they don't want to go against the U.S. I mean, we see time and time again over the past year and a half that they have been afraid to offend the United States, to offend Donald Trump. They will continually surrender so as not to cause difficulty with the Trump administration. So I think that's also at play here. But what was particularly shocking to me about that letter from 22 EU countries is it was co-initiated by Denmark. So it was co-initiated along with Italy. Giorgia Meloni and Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen co-initiated that letter. So while Denmark is asking for the rest of Europe's solidarity in defending Greenland from territorial threats, in defending Danish territorial integrity, when it came to Spain's territorial integrity, Denmark was not showing solidarity, and Denmark was actually taking the side of the others.
Yeah, and I mean, just to go back to the US point and the fact that Trump was potentially involved in this, I mean, we're seeing this more and more. There's this very weird vibe coming out of the Republicans in the US who seem to be panicking about the fact that they're about to get absolutely slaughtered in the midterms. We're seeing lots of really outlandish behavior coming with the international sphere, where they keep trying to give all these gifts to all these people and playing games with Ukraine, playing games with Morocco, playing games with the Palestine-Israel situation, trying the best they can to get what they want out there and just throwing it out in the hopes that they won't be able to have it rowed back when the Democrats presumably win in the midterms and come back a lot stronger. There is a very good chance that the Ceuta situation is entirely beefed up by the Americans. I've seen some quotes from Israeli government officials saying they supported this as well, like in the lead up to the situation, which does raise questions because you know that Pedro Sanchez is on very bad terms with the Likud government in Israel, who are a far-right government. He's on very bad terms with Donald Trump, who is a far-right president in the United States. it wouldn't surprise me if this was some kind of retribution for the fact that Pedro Sanchez was not actually playing the games that other people wanted him to play, and
And,
does have a
and
habit of standing strong.
specifically retribution for closing the access to the US base in Spain.
Exactly.
Because actually that's the context in which this was mentioned in that State Department memo, that Spain and other European countries needed to be punished for not joining the Iran war. That's specifically what the memo was drafted for. So basically the memo was saying that European countries should be punished for not joining in the Iran war by encouraging other countries to take their territory.
Exactly.
And it's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't share the view that they expect. Actually, there isn't a chance that they expect that Morocco can take it with no pushback, because the American right views all Europeans as weak. I think the term they use for us is soy boys or whatever. But despite the fact that most of these people are obese, but whatever, especially in the US government right now. But the reality is that Spain wouldn't have a huge military issue when it comes to dealing with Morocco in general, because the Spanish military is one of the top 5. And the European military.
But they would have an issue if Morocco is backed by the United States.
Perhaps, but I don't think.
If you had it, because I agree with you that militarily, if we were just looking at Morocco and Spain going to war with no outside factors, Spain would win that war, because Spain is actually a fairly significant military power. But if you had, Morocco has demonstrated that they can flood Ceuta and Melilla with a similar Green March type thing like they did in 1975, even with civilians that you can't fight, right? And then the US can step in and say, we're now recognizing these as Moroccan territories.
But
I think that's very good at.
But the US government also calls the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. No one really pays attention to that, to be honest. So they can recognize what they want as what they want, right? The reality is that on the ground, the things are different. And I also struggle to believe that if Morocco declared war on Spain, it would take these enclaves, which I think would be, considering the difference in the military forces, in the naval forces, and the Moroccan dependence on European trade, I view it as anything's possible, but it's so improbable. It doesn't surprise me that the only people screaming about this are Moroccan nationalists and MAGA. Like, it's so outside.
Well, but the other people screaming about this are Spanish nationalists. So here in Spain, I can tell you, they really think this is a possibility. And this is both people on the left and the right, but particularly on the right. They have long just stirred up this specter of Morocco invading not just Ceuta and Melilla, but also the Canary Islands. This is something I hear from Spanish people on the right all the time, that Morocco has designs on the Canary Islands. But so it's also coming from here.
Yeah, but by nationalists, are we talking Partido Popular or are we talking about Vox?
Yes,
because the Vox guys,
PP and Vox,
even TP, because I know that Vox are completely out of their minds and they actually think that they're gonna resurrect Franco and take over Morocco again. But the Partido Popular, I struggle to see why they would view an invasion by Morocco as genuinely serious, because it would take so much good luck and so much assistance from other states for Morocco to be able to engage in this. I think to stand toe-to-toe with just Spain in terms of naval forces, they would need everybody in North Africa to sort of come together and help them.
I think whether the PP genuinely believes that Morocco could take these territories is another question. But they will easily use this as a club to hammer the current center-left government. And they've been doing so over the past days. Basically, Sanchez is being weak. And, again, like we said at the beginning, it is Spain insisting that Morocco not be mentioned here, right?
Yeah, of course.
This isn't even, it's a very weird situation, right? Because I don't know if we had a counterfactual here where Spain was saying, we've been attacked by Morocco, we're calling for solidarity from the EU and other European countries. It's very murky in my mind whether they would get that solidarity. But the fact is they're not asking for it, right? They're asking for solidarity because of an attack, but they're not saying who attacked them. They're talking about these vague, social media, smuggling networks. And of course, with the social media thing, they're all talking about Russia, because Russia's like the easy one to blame. You mentioned it before, but when Belarus, in cooperation with Russia, was using migrants as a weapon in this hybrid warfare against Poland, everybody had sympathy with Poland. Everybody was showing solidarity with Poland. Nobody was blaming Poland when immigrants were flooding across the Polish border. But that's because Poland had and still has a conservative government. And the EU is conservative ruled. And now, when you have a country that's ruled by basically the only leftist leader in the European Union, the other conservative leaders are so eager to score political points against that person that they don't show solidarity. But it's also a question of who the enemy is, because of course, Russia is the most convenient enemy. It's the most openly acknowledged enemy in Europe. There's no downside at this point or risk to condemning Russia and Belarus for using hybrid warfare. But there's a big risk for condemning Morocco for using hybrid warfare, because they're depending on Morocco so much for a variety of trade and migration reasons, and because Morocco is now backed by the United States.
Yeah. And I mean, there is something to be said about the fact that they keep this just keeps happening to the EU. I mean, we keep coming back to this thing that there's weak leadership in the EU. We've talked about von der Leyen. We've talked about the situation with all of the US trade deals and the fact that von der Leyen seems to have a bad habit of bending over backwards in general. And again, we have a problem where the majority of the member states are run by conservative leaders and are playing politics with these situations and these crises, which in one way is a good thing because it shows that we are actually Europeanizing politics at the European stage. So to some extent, great. On the other hand, is creating these crises where we're actually seeing the erosion of European solidarity in general, and we're seeing these situations where people are playing politics with these crises. But one thing that I think has actually, I'm going to try to be typically French and optimistic in this situation and look at this from a very positive view. The fact that these member states did this, they betrayed Spain in such an atrocious way. The fact that even the French were stood to the side just tutting and like shaking their heads. And then immediately had to row it back and have come out of this looking obscenely foolish, to the point that the only people who seem happy to continue this discourse about how Spain has been overrun by migrants and all this stuff, the American right.
It's the Americans,
Yeah. And also the Moroccan nationalists who want this crisis to happen. And I think this is a big part of why maybe Sanchez is asking everybody to keep it down, to not play up the actual behavior of Morocco here, because there are factions in the Moroccan government, which we need to remember is effectively a dictatorship, that they want an open war with Spain because they think it's a way of advancing their political goals at home, to mobilize more soldiers, to mobilize more people, and to actually create these kind of situations that are going to allow them to prosper. It's the far right trying to create chaos and war to actually prosper in general, like they do in Putin's Russia. And I can see Sanchez seeing that coming. He probably knows, and there were warnings by Spanish intelligence that this was going to happen. They just didn't expect it to be this big, which
they're denying, which the Spanish government is denying, not very convincingly.
There was a nice leak that came out yesterday night and another second leak this morning, so we can assume that it is the case. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's trying to play nice because the Moroccan government got in over their heads.
Yeah.
Let's face it, with this situation, Morocco has two options now in general. Either they're a belligerent who should not be trusted at all and who should ideally be punished and sanctioned for several years by the European Union, which Morocco doesn't want. Or Morocco needs to bite the bullet and accept that it's going to be treated as an incompetence that launched itself into an endeavor that blew up in his face, made it look terrible, and made it look absolutely humiliatingly incompetent. Because what dictatorship in the world will launch itself into a situation where it could risk a conflict with a neighboring country and then lose control of the situation within the space of an hour?
Yeah.
Like it's
and have its own citizens die in the process.
Have its own citizens die. 70 people, 80 people, I think now is the total. Around 80 people have died because Morocco wanted to play games and attempted to humiliate Spain. And
perhaps we don't know that for sure.
But it's my working assumption, and it's the assumption of many of the Moroccan friends and Moroccan colleagues that I've spoken to and that I know, to assume that this was some form of hybrid attack to extract concessions. But that's my working theory. And to be honest, the Moroccan government did not come out of this well. It did not
Yeah.
come out of this well. And on top of that, we've been seeing videos popping up on Twitter, which we need to be verified, I think, by some OSINT guys. Of while this was happening, I think it was a crown prince of Morocco was potentially out partying in Paris or something, and there was some pretty unflattering videos coming out in on social media. Apparently, I can't verify them myself because I'm not, an expert on the Moroccan royal family's behavior, but it's not looking good in general for the people involved. And there is something to be said about the grace being showed by Pedro Sanchez, considering the fact that he just took on Morocco, 22 member states, Ursula von der Leyen, Donald Trump, Netanyahu's staff in Israel. At this stage, I'm half tempted to say that Pedro Sanchez is going to run to be FIFA president because this guy is apparently completely untouchable and can beat whoever he wants. Because for those who aren't in the know, there is a more true than you'd imagine joke about Pedro Sanchez is being politically bulletproof and he can survive
Yeah.
anything. And to be
So
honest,
you've
he's
been
kind of proved that
PISO'd
right.
here.
Yeah, exactly. This
Yeah.
guy is surviving.
Yeah. I mean, I think the two really frustrating things here is that I think you're right that it may be that from the Spanish government's point of view, from the Sanchez government's point of view, they are doing the responsible thing here by de-escalating, even though they would have every right, especially to vindicate themselves against these European, against Mette Frederiksen, against Giorgia Meloni, and humiliate them further by being like, you attacked us while we were getting, while EU territory was getting invaded. I mean, that would be a particular way to humiliate Mette Frederiksen. And they feel that they're doing the responsible thing here by tamping this down, saying, let's move on. Let's not acknowledge what happened here. But we're now in a weird situation where all of us know what happened, right? I mean, everyone I talk to in Brussels thinks that Morocco instigated this, and whether they intended 72,000 or they intended 6,000, we don't know. But I don't really know anyone who is really sure that Morocco wasn't behind this. So, but that's not going to be clear to the citizens. I mean, that's not how most of the media is reporting this. There's been a couple of New York Times articles. I see Politico did something, but like that's not going to reach the average citizen.
No.
So I think here in Spain, if I went down there to the beach and asked somebody, I think they're keeping abreast of this, they would probably say, yeah, I think Morocco did it. But outside of Spain, it's just going to look like this was a migration crisis that Spain handled badly, when in fact this was not a migration crisis. This was a political crisis and even a geopolitical crisis. But that's not going to be the storyline. That'll be the storyline for those of us who follow these things, but not for the citizens out there. And that's what I think the dangerous thing is here. And in that sense, I'm really talking about the signaling. I mean, the signal that was sent here, and Danish people, this should particularly concern them, because the signal that was sent to the world was that if you attack an EU country, if you violate the territorial sovereignty of an EU country, other EU countries are not going to have their back if they happen to be not happy with that country's leader at that exact given moment. So they need the unity of the EU in defending territorial sovereignty, which Denmark has wanted to portray as ironclad, now clearly is up for question. And that's Denmark's fault. Denmark did this. Mette Frederiksen did this. And that's the real shame of it.
And let's face it, the fact that this was led by one country whose leader, and I'm talking about Italy's Meloni here, who was purely desperate for a bump in the polls because she's looking a bit shaky going into upcoming elections. And Mette Frederiksen, who is from a small member state that is dependent on everybody around to help her and support her, which is the whole point of European unity in general. Throwing another member state under the bus like this, we should all, if it wasn't so strategically important, there would be very good reason for us the next time that Donald Trump starts saying, oh, hey, Greenland is mine, why the hell should we support Frederiksen and Denmark when they won't support Spain? And I mean, again, let's also be clear. There's something here. And again, this is part of the same calculation that Morocco has to eat, and now these countries have to now eat it too. Excuse my French, how the fuck are these people getting away with pretending that Ceuta is somehow in the middle of Spain next to Madrid, and that all of these people are going to start rushing the border with fucking Italy?
You even
And
had British people. You had Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary in the UK, sharing an image of what was happening in Ceuta and saying, next they're coming to the UK and they're going to be here any moment, crossing two
how
different
far?
bodies of water.
So crossing a continent. What are they going to do? The backstroke around Spain and France and just land in Cornwall?
I really had the impression a lot of people did not know where Ceuta was. That
Apparently.
I think Suella Braverman honestly did not know anything about Ceuta when she said that.
Suella Braverman is categorically not a very smart person. Like, I've followed her work when she was in the government. I've seen the things she said. That woman has no clue what's happening. She's part of the Liz Truss cohort of people who could not actually survive long term in any position of power if there was anything there. But we have to ask ourselves, how do we have so many politicians who are so happy to play dumb and pretend that they don't understand basic geography? And on top of that, they've exposed themselves, and their staffs have exposed themselves to the accusation that they're not very good at their jobs. They don't understand what's happening. They're not very clever. And on top of this, that they're not actually capable of having a reasoned thoughts when it comes to a moment of crisis, despite the fact that, for all intents and purposes, the situation was handled pretty much perfectly from the go.
From a migration standpoint.
From a migration standpoint.
The thing is, there is no way that Giorgia Meloni doesn't know where Ceuta is. Not only does she speak Spanish, but if I'm not wrong, she spent part of her childhood in the Canary Islands, I think. So, so there's no way she doesn't know. So she, I think she had the wrong instincts. You can tell that the Italian government in particular recognizes they fucked up here because they're kind of stuck with this 1 month, spot checks on planes arriving from Spain thing because they can't back down now. But they're not really talking about it anymore. They're majorly playing it down. They were talking about solidarity with Spain and all this. I mean, you can tell everyone can tell they fucked up because at that meeting, they were so keen to say unity, unity, unity. Solidarity, solidarity, solidarity.
They applauded Spain. They applauded the Spanish government's handling of the situation. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, because they can tell they messed up. But like you say, the narrative is still going in the UK, in the US right-wing media. They haven't stopped because they didn't really get the update even. Like they don't understand how much Meloni messed up here. Domestically, I don't know. Will people in Italy get the memo? The Italians I talk to are generally fans of hers anyway, but they think she's looking foolish here. I don't know.
I mean, the Italians I've spoken to have the combination of words was I feel embarrassed. Why did she do this? Who told her to do this? The other series of words I usually heard was Tajani's an idiot for actually letting this happen. But really, it's
and he doubled down, right? Like in that Twitter feud with the Spanish foreign minister, and basically was saying things were in that letter that weren't actually in the letter, which I'm sure displeased the other 21 signatories in that letter.
Yeah, and let's face it, this is a 50-year-old man who apparently has severe memory issues, who shouldn't be in government in any way, because just incompetence out the wazoo. But I'm wondering, honestly, if a lot of the people were also ordered to play this down in this meeting yesterday, and that they're expecting to have a more quiet discussion about how not to let that happen again when the actual council meeting happens next month. Or in October.
Maybe. I mean, because actually Bart de Wever, the Belgian prime minister, was calling for that. He wanted to convene an extraordinary European Council summit with EU prime ministers in the next month, I think. That's not ever a popular idea, making people work in August in Europe. But that was immediately shut down. But he's the European leader who came the closest to acknowledging what happened here, what likely happened here.
Yeah.
He didn't name Morocco, but he said, 72,000 people just don't stream across the border all of a sudden without some kind of foreign actor being involved. So maybe you're right. Maybe at the autumn summit, they talk about this, but it would surprise me because by then we will have moved on. They're still going to be nervous about upsetting the delicate balance with not only Morocco as a partner, but also the United States as a partner. I mean, they'll still be worried about the hornet's nest that they could just stir up there.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the calendar now. The next council meeting's on 15th October. Yeah, they're not going to wait that long. What's more likely to happen is they may have an informal meeting at some point soon. once everybody's off their jet skis and they're back to dealing with whatever's happening. And then maybe we'll see some kind of discussion and mea culpa from some people. But yeah, I don't think, I think we've both been pretty clear in what we've written and put up on our Substacks, that pretty much nobody covered himself with any glory whatsoever over the last weekend. Because, we can't, we come from a particular brand of politics where we're both federalists, so we're both big on European unity, we're both big on this European community and actually developing this into something that can be done and can become something positive. So for us, it's outrageous. And like you said earlier, a lot of what we know, a lot of what we're seeing in the European press, a lot of what we're seeing in let's call it the upper level of the press, like the ones that speak about these important issues, isn't filtering down. I've seen on social media already across Twitter that you've got people like Visegrad24 already posting AI-generated videos of migrants breaking from Ceuta to Spain, people being allowed off planes into Spanish territory and all this kind of, people see that stuff. They don't see what we're seeing in the press and the journalism that we're actually taking in. And so I think you're right. Yeah. People are just going to think this is another wave of migration. And let's face it, in some of the most followed elections coming up, particularly in France, you've already got the far right who are making these things in general, Though I just noticed a very interesting question, which you may want to read out.
Jesus. So, the Manuel, I think it's supposed to be thing, not thing, unless Manuel is a fin.
I think it's thing.
Okay. So Manuel says, the most striking thing here is that Spain is trying to play it down and not blame Morocco for what happened. And so the EU, after yesterday's meeting, I think it's supposed to be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Manuel is not a fin, I think. Yeah. That's what really struck me as well, that we're in this very weird situation where Spain wants solidarity for an attack, but won't say who attacked them. And we were speculating before, in an alternative scenario here where Spain did ask for solidarity specifically because they think they were attacked by Morocco. Would Europeans have shown them solidarity? We'll never know because Spain didn't ask. That's the difficult thing.
Yeah.
And for all the reasons we were saying before, we can understand where the Spanish government is coming from. And I'm sure they feel like they're being the responsible ones by de-escalating, but it leaves everybody with a bit of frustration, I'd say.
Yeah, and I struggle to see how Spain could have asked for solidarity in any sense of the word when pretty much everybody immediately... the first reaction we got from a European leader was Keating out of Schengen from Meloni and Frederiksen. And at that point, people came in so fast and supported that nonsense so quickly because, again, either sheer incompetence, sheer opportunism, or they just never studied the map in their lives. They rushed for it, and that's the really sad thing. And I think we all agree on this in general. But the reality is, the only way that we're going to get out of this kind of situation in the future is if we manage to, in my view, strengthen Frontex and start putting Frontex forces in these hotspots where these kind of abuses can happen. We're also seeing stuff now about Meloni pushing for more off-continent centers for receiving these migrants and these migrant pathways. But the problem is that, again, this has been something that's been floated so many times over the last 10 years. And it's usually found to either be completely ineffective, exposing the EU to even more blackmail from countries like Morocco and Libya and Turkey. And on top of that, it's extremely expensive. So a lot of the time, these don't necessarily actually make sense. And quite often, if the Moroccan government suddenly had a tantrum and said, we want everybody from Europe out of our territory, get out, we have no real way of actually just staying there and leaving our soldiers or Frontex there. No. We would have to actually pull them all out. And so really, the solutions that we have at our disposal right now don't quite make sense. And with Germany trying to screw over the next year EU budget and pull off, they try to cut out 500 million or something, there's probably not more money for Frontex right now, which is a big issue because how else are we going to start funding these more effective migration defenses, I'd say, which is the wrong word, but is really what we're talking about. Yeah. It's a difficult situation, to be honest. I don't really see how the European leaders are going to find the sense to actually deal with the situation right now. which leaves us with a lot of disinformation and a lot of far-right weirdos making shit up.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned people being on their jet skis. I gotta hop on mine behind me.
Jesus Christ, man. You're kidding
Looking
me.
for a way to close it. I
What
don't
the
actually have a
hell?
jet ski.
I hope
I don't
you
think I've
have a
ever
jet
jet
ski.
skied in my life, to be fair. No, I don't think I've ever done it.
You should.
I'm not super into the adventure sports.
Listen, you live on the beach. Don't do this. Don't be that guy. Just go on a jet ski. Just go.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
What you
Thanks,
can do,
guys,
actually.
the people literally jet skiing behind me right now.
Yeah, I can see it. What you can do, get on a jet ski, go see what's happening down south, and then come back and let us know if they.
I can do my own on-the-ground reporting. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Again, pretty depressing couple of days here, but it is what it is. We'll see. Maybe, like we said, maybe at the summit we'll get some more. The next European Council summit, we'll get some more forthright conversation about what actually happened here. But for the moment, looks like everything is being papered over and put under the carpet, and that's just going to be the way it is. But thanks, guys, for watching. Yeah, and stay tuned to both of our subsects for more analysis of EU politics and policy. Take care.
Yes. Ciao, guys.